All right, Alexander, let's talk about John Bolton, the revamped Project for a New American Century, the PNAC. And this one's a new one. This one is a new one, the Turkish Democracy Project. So Turkey has been targeted for a regime change. And it looks like they're going to start with the standard formula, protests, getting people out on the streets. And I imagine they're going to work their way up to, if they're successful, work their way up to some sort of civil war or something. I would imagine that's the grand master strategy of Bolton and his neocon cronies. What is going on here, Alexander? The Turkish Democracy Project. What a name.
Indeed, and it's important to stress that, of course, it's got absolutely nothing to do with democracy. Now, John Bolton seems to be the presiding genius in this particular project, but you're absolutely right in saying that it is entirely a construction of the neocons, and the neocons now seem to have Turkey and Erdogan in their sights. Now, I have to say that's not a surprise to me, not because Erdogan is an enemy of the United States exactly. After all, Turkey is a member of NATO, and one would assume that, it's an ally. But in reality, of course, Erdogan has been following all kinds of policies around the Middle East and in the Eastern Mediterranean and in Central Asia and in all sorts of places, which cut across the ambitions, not just, of course, of the US, we have other powers, but, of course, and specifically of the neocons. So he's not playing their game in places like Iraq, in places in Syria. He's cozying up too closely to the Russians by buying weapons from them, that he has this on and off relationship with Putin in Russia. He's got all kinds of ideas in the Eastern Mediterranean, all sorts of things. So, of course, from their point of view, he has to be removed, because when the neocons find somebody who isn't 100% reliable, they see you as disposable, and they act to remove you. And that is exactly what this Turkey Democracy Project is all about. And it comes with all the standard language and cliches that you get from neocon publications. They always talk in exactly the same way about how, the new government of Turkey is becoming increasingly repressive, how it's detaching Turkey from its supposedly democratic moorings. I mean, anybody who knows anything about Turkish history knows that the whole idea of Turkey once being a democracy from which it was rescued by Erdogan is a complete misrepresentation. For most of the period since Turkey became independent of the Ottoman Empire back in the 1920s, it has been a dictatorship, including most of the time it was part of NATO. It has been a dictatorship. And that never bothered the neocons up to now. But what they want to do is they want to do their usual thing. They want to remove Erdogan, and they want to weaken Turkey or break up Turkey and destabilize Turkey, because, as John Bolton has openly admitted in an article he has written for the Daily Telegraph, an obit that he has done for his former friend Donald Rumsfeld, George Bush's defense secretary, who worked with him in the invasion of Iraq and in the neocon wars of the early 2000s. As Bolton openly admits, destroying countries is their business, reconstructing them is not. They are not interested in a democracy as such. They don't set out to make countries better. So far as they're concerned, provided these countries, the governments of these countries that stand in the way of whatever project the neocons have are destroyed, these countries can fall apart and go to pieces, and that's absolutely fine, because rebuilding them is not in the interests of what the neocons say is the interests of the US, but what is in fact in their own interests. So, civil war in Turkey? Absolutely. Chaos in Turkey? That too. It doesn't matter, provided Erdogan and the government he represents is destroyed.
All right, so let me read you a tweet from Bolton as he launches the Turkish Democracy Project. They even got a logo, the whole works. The whole works, guys. Here is the tweet. You guys will be seeing it on the screen right now from John Bolton. It's time to sound the alarm on Turkey. Under an authoritarian leader, a once reliable NATO ally is turning its back on democracy and embracing Russia. I'm pleased to join the Turkish Project Advisory Council to shine a light on the darkening situation. Alexander, Turkey is targeted for regime change by the neocons. No doubt about it. On the one hand, this is a project that's doomed to fail because it's Turkey. You're dealing with Erdogan. Erdogan is, like him or not, love him or hate him, he is very, very clever, a very clever politician, and he's a survivor. On the other hand, I could definitely see this group leveraging the Kurds and the Kurdish situation, not only in Syria, northern Syria, but absolutely and I believe you're looking at about 30 million, if I'm correct, Alexander, 30 million Kurds inside of Turkey. Maybe I'm wrong, guys. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments down below, but I do believe you're talking about a significant population of Kurds in Turkey. I could definitely see the neocons and these neolibs. I don't think you can distinguish them anymore. I could definitely see them leveraging that as they move from protest to civil war. Once again, they're going to do the same playbook they use everywhere else. Alexander, what do you think of Bolton's tweet and of the Kurds?
Well, absolutely. Well, and there it is. I mean, he's not. Erdogan is getting too close to Russia. That means he's not a friend. That means he's not an ally. That means he has to be removed. So we do that. Of course, we talk about democracy, but democracy isn't our objective. That's not what we're really all about. I'm going to quote a little from Bolton's other article, the one he wrote about Rumsfeld. He said, Rumsfeld did not believe in nation building, certainly not to the extent of trying to plant and nurture democracies in unfertile soil. Rumsfeld made public the logic he pursued during the Bush administration. He expressly rejected the pottery barn rule, a popular maxim that held, if you break it, you own it, arguing vigorously that America's involvement had broken neither Afghanistan and Iraq, and that their problems were their own. In other words, smash up a country, create chaos there, and it's not your business afterwards. I mean, provided you achieve your immediate objective of removing the government, then whatever happens there, well, that's no longer the US's business. It's not its problem. The people of that country, be it Iraq, be it Afghanistan, be it Libya, now, of course, it's going to be Turkey. Well, that's their problem from that point on. And so when he talks about Turkish democracy, he doesn't really mean democracy. He means part of his grand neocon strategy to destroy a political leader and his government that is acting independently of the United States by becoming too close to the Russians. Now, I agree with you. I think in one sense, this is indeed going to fail. I suspect what it's going to do within Turkey itself is it's going to consolidate support for Erdogan, because people in Turkey will say, well, we saw what happened in Iraq, we saw what happened in Libya, we saw what happened in Afghanistan, we don't want the same thing to happen in our own country. We're not going to involve ourselves in protests against Erdogan, which might be, in fact, protests which, for all we know, the neocons are sponsoring. And it gives Erdogan a tremendous weapon, propaganda, political information weapon that he can use against his political rivals who have been winning elections recently in places like Ankara and Izmir and Istanbul. So it actually strengthens Erdogan in a sense. But At the same time, it sows the dragon's teeth, because, as you absolutely rightly say, the neocons, when they embark on one of these ventures, they don't stop. They're perfectly willing to play Kurds off against Turks, play other ethnic groups or sectarian groups, and there are many of them in Turkey, the Halevi and all those sort of people, against the Turkish authorities. So civil war in Turkey, absolutely fine. Support terrorism within Turkey itself, be it from the Turks, from the Kurds, other groups, possibly even jihadis. That's fine too, provided you achieve your overall objective of overthrowing this government, which is getting too close, as Bolton puts it, to Russia, but which in reality is too independent of the United States and is too involved in pursuing its own policies around the Middle East. And if it was just John Bolton, it wouldn't be a problem. But of course, there's lots of other people involved. It's all the usual group of neocons. They've all come together. And the first thing we're going to see, where they always begin, is we're going to see a major propaganda campaign now, beginning in the Western media, against Turkey, against Erdogan, against the government there, in order to isolate it, in order to make it look increasingly precarious, and in order to prepare the ground for the protests and the demonstrations and the fighting and the trouble in Turkey, which we know is to come.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll be able to pull it off. I mean, you have a weak president in Biden, a weak administration, so it's possible that they may be able to pull this off. They've got allies in the Department of State. You look at, say, someone like Victoria Nuland, who's a chief neocon. I mean, she's way high up on the neocon ladder of things. She's in the State Department, so they could pull this off. I'll say it again: it is a massive undertaking. I can't even begin to imagine, pulling what they did in Iraq or Syria or Libya in Turkey, but. I think of 2016, and I'm not saying the U.S. was responsible for that coup, but I believe that the U.S. definitely, turned their head away, and they said, we don't see anything going on when the coup was taking place. I mean, I don't want to say they greenlit it, but they definitely didn't try to prevent it. So, I mean, there was a coup just a few years ago, an attempted coup. So something like this really could happen. My God, if it does happen. I mean, the whole Middle East is just gonna burst into flames, I think. Alexander, an obvious question that comes to me as well. So comment on that, and then a real quick question is: why don't they just, if the neocons can get the Biden administration on side, why don't they just blow up the currency, the lira, which is so weak? Or is that not a possibility?
Well, first of all, it is a very, very strong possibility. Now, let's just get to the neocons. I have never known them to lose a foreign policy battle in Washington. Whenever there are forces whenever there's an argument within the US about whether to embrace a neocon initiative, be it on Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, you name it, there are always people, sensible, realistic people, who say this is an extremely bad idea and we shouldn't even think about doing it. And they're always in the end outmaneuvered by the neocons, who are very entrenched in the State Department and in the intelligence community, and to some extent also in the Pentagon, and of course in the media. And those people always in the end win. So I have absolutely no doubt about this. Regime change in Turkey is not now just on the agenda. It is semi-officially part of the greater US government's agenda. And certainly with a weak presidency, there is no restraining element on these people. They will run away with this thing. They're absolutely going to pursue it, and pursuing it by all the methods that they possibly can, crashing the lira being one of them. I mean, trying to engineer hyperinflation in Turkey, which shouldn't be that difficult, by the way, given Erdogan's own follies, is, I would have thought now, pretty much baked in the cake. And there will be other things too. As I said, they will work with all the so-called civil society groups that they have in Turkey, which exist in Turkey as they exist pretty much everywhere else. They will get involved, as you rightly said, with the Kurds. They will do all of those things. But nobody should be under any illusions about this. If we are talking about Turkey, a key NATO ally, one of the largest, most powerful, best organized states in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Near East, what once used to be called, in colonial times, the Levant. Well, frankly, you know, the crisis in Iraq, the crisis in Syria, it's going to look like a tea party by comparison. I mean, Turkey is on a scale far bigger than any of these countries. It nearly descended into civil war in the late 1970s, in other words, within my own lifetime. I mean, a crisis like that in Turkey will be something on an absolutely gigantic scale. And if the European Union has been worried up to now about refugee flows from the Middle East, if there is this kind of crisis in Turkey, well, believe me, I mean, the refugee flows from the Middle East we've seen up to now will be as nothing compared to what we will see coming out from Turkey then, in that case. So this is a totally reckless, completely irresponsible policy. But I expect it to be embraced. I expect it to be pursued. I hope and believe it will fail. I'm not absolutely confident that it will fail, and it is going to engineer another massive disaster on our hands. And we see the neocon in chief, John Bolton, saying, well, when that disaster comes, I will simply walk away because that's not my concern. My concern is to pull down Erdogan. And if the whole Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean descends into chaos, well, that's not my problem.
Yeah, Bolton said it in the obituary for Rumsfeld. The goal is not nation building. The goal is chaos. That is the ultimate goal, is chaos. So my final question to you is, God, I hope this doesn't happen as well, because I think it'll be a disaster, something that we haven't seen in our generation. I think it could be that big of a disaster. But my question to you is, you can't have a war between the two power forces, let's say the US, Western Europe, and Russia and China. That's out of the question. I think that's now a reality after the Geneva summit. We understand that there can't be a World War III type of scenario. So my mind goes to this plan by Bolton, which is the neocons and the neoliberals thinking, you know what, we need to have a war. We have to get a war going, and we have to get a war that's significant, that'll achieve our goals and create chaos, pull down various economies, and get to where we want to go in the future. Say, I'll put a date, say 2030. I'm just thinking of a date off the top of my head. and you know, it'll get them to where they want to go. But the neocons and the neoliberals actually believe that they could create the dynamics for a major conflict, but it could be contained so that it doesn't spiral out of control and become a World War III type of scenario. So what happens with Russia and China in this case? And do you think that the neocons and neoliberals could create terrible chaos in the region, but contain it to a level that it doesn't move towards a global scale? Do you understand my question? Because the chaos is the goal, and they want to go somewhere with this chaos. They have an agenda to go somewhere in the near distant future, but they understand after Geneva that we can't go head to head against Russia and China. It's not going to happen, especially with the new weapons that Russia has.
Absolutely. Now, can I just say, we have been saying this.
It's a big question. So
yeah, I know, but we have been saying this right from the day that the new administration took office, that the neocons are going to use the change in administrations to press for a war. And we've always said the Middle East was the most likely place. They tried, I think, Ukraine in April, and that didn't work out because the Russians responded so quickly. And as you rightly said, a war between the two blocs now, the two great blocs, is now impossible. So they've been looking for a war, and look what they found. They found Turkey instead. And you're absolutely right. With their usual arrogance, they think they can contain it. And of course they can't. You cannot contain a crisis in a place like Turkey. If Turkey descends into chaos and civil war, it will have repercussions in the Middle East, in Central Asia, in the Eastern Mediterranean, in the Balkans, and of course in terms of refugee flows across Western Europe as well. Now, I mean, if you look at what the Russians and the Chinese think, the Russians will be extremely concerned because, of course, if Turkey spirals downward, they will be worried about jihadi movements establishing themselves in Turkey and trying to extend themselves again into the Caucasus and into Central Asia. I would not be surprised, by the way, if that was part of the ultimate neocon plan. I mean, that's the kind of way these people think. So, of course, the Russians are going to be extremely worried about this. But the Europeans should be worried about it also, because Turkey is on their doorstep. It's a NATO ally. It's a country which for a long time they were talking about bringing into the European Union. It's the place where the refugees come from. And yet we see this thing being talked about and debated in the same way. Maybe it is far away from the United States, but of course it's not far away from Europe. And a chaos like this in a country like Turkey, it just doesn't even bear thinking about. I mean, the destruction that would wreak is just beyond estimation. There is no way you could contain such a thing. I mean, again, establishing jihadi groups in Turkey, it could affect China too, in Xinjiang province and those sort of places. So ultimately, I think, and this is a point to understand, I think the Russians and the Chinese are strong enough to control these problems on their sort of southern underbelly, if you like. And once again, the country that would find itself faced with trying to control these problems would be the US itself, because ultimately it is the US's allies in the Middle East, in places like Saudi Arabia, the Gulf, Israel, and in Western Europe, who would be the most exposed. So this is a reckless, an irresponsible, a delusional, a mad policy, and yet it is now being embraced, and we will see it pursued, and we will see it pursued with all kinds of disastrous results. May I just add again one final point, which is that we saw some sensible people in the United States a few weeks and months ago talking about the fact that the US needs to withdraw from the Middle East, and it needs to sort of try and sort out some kind of withdrawal from the Middle East, and perhaps withdraw from, or at least get some kind of predictable and stable relationship with Russia in Europe so that it can focus on China and the Pacific instead. Well, what Bolton and co want to do is to involve the United States in more chaos and more war in the Middle East, exactly contrary to that much more realistic and grounded policy. But that's the sort of people we're dealing with. They are compulsively in need of a war. It's almost an addiction to them. They couldn't get it in Ukraine, so they've now gone after Turkey, and we will have to live with the consequences.
Yeah, I mean, 4 years of Trump without a war, and we're now heading into 6 months of Biden. It can't go on much longer.
No.
these guys, they have to get a war soon. I mean, any day now
Absolutely.
they have to start something up, because it's just, they can't go on 5 years without some sort of conflict. So, God, we're sounding the alarm, and groups like this undertaking that Bolton has taken up, this group for Turkish democracy thing, we're sounding the alarm bells, Alexander. We're sounding the alarm bells, and I think the first sign that something is really brewing is, I think, like you said, if we start to see the media reports of dictator Erdogan starting to really ramp up in the BBC, in MSNBC, CNN. If we start to see that, Erdogan dictator, then we know that this thing is for real.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I'm going to finish by making one observation. I mean, here we see the results of Erdogan's policies. I mean, he has been overambitious on far too big a scale. He needs to start acting far more realistically, because for the first time, to a great extent, he really is in the sights of the neocons. I mean, quite possibly they were involved in some level in the 2016 coup. We will never know the exact nature of what took place there, because it's all very obscure, and Erdogan has blamed it all on the Gulen organization. But this time, the neocons openly have him in their sights. And he needs to adjust to that. He needs to adjust to that fast. So no more talking to Zelensky of Ukraine and annoying Moscow. No more playing games with the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province. No more, grand talk about establishing a kind of Turkish confederation in Central Asia. All of those things are reckless and irresponsible. He needs to focus now on protecting himself, obviously, but Turkey too, because, I take back none of the criticisms, the many criticisms of Erdogan I have made, but he is the leader of Turkey, and his primary responsibility is to his own country and to his own people. They are now in danger, like they have never been at any time before since the end of the Second World War. And that's not an exaggeration. That is the truth. Mm-hmm.
They've put it out there. They've announced it.
Absolutely.
What more do you need? If Erdogan doesn't see this, then I don't know what to say, but they've been targeted.
Absolutely.
Period.
Exactly.
And he shouldn't underestimate them. Shouldn't underestimate them.
Well, no. Look what damage they've done. Just look across your border and see what's happened in Iraq and Syria and Libya and Afghanistan, which isn't that far away, and Ukraine. They've wreaked their havoc all around you. Do you want to see that happen in your own country, in Turkey too? Erdogan needs to understand that. Erdogan's supporters need to understand that. Erdogan's critics need to understand that too. And the Kurds need to also understand that the United States, or rather, let's not talk about the United States. The neocons are not their friends. They are using them. And once they no longer need them, they will dump them, because that's what the neocons do.
Yeah. All right. Wow. All right. We'll leave it there, guys. Check us out on Locals. Join our Locals community, guys. Share your stories to our Locals community. Also, look for us on BitChute, ODYSEE, SuperU, the free speech video platform, and Rumble. Alexander's channel, my channel, the Duran. We're on all of those platforms. And also, go to the Duran shop, Alexander, 10% off when you use the code. Yeah,
I've got a British mug this time. The UK.
All right. The Union Jack. Yes, I've got
the
Mexico.
Union Jack.
Right there. And buy mugs, shirts, hats. We saw a lot of people buying the hats. You guys seem to like the hats, the embroidered hats. They're fantastic. So you'll find all those links in the description box. Take care.